Hey guys, welcome to question MM445 of the Maths Methods Fortify study guide. In this question we've got a wildlife sanctuary in Africa and it contains a number of giraffes. The length of an adult giraffe's neck, x meters, in this sanctuary is a continuous random variable given by the probability density function this. Find the expected length of a giraffe's neck in this sanctuary. Awesome. So whenever we talk about expected length, we're talking about our mean, right? So E of x, which is the same as our mean, which in continuous probability density functions is from our lower to our upper of x times our function, okay, of d of x, dx. Which means that our expected value here is going to be from our lower to our upper, so from 3 on 2 to 5 on 2 of x multiplied by our function, which in this case is 1 minus x take 2 cubed dx. Awesome. So now I would just simply plug this into our CAS and expand that out, just so that we can kind of see what's going on. And what we get is negative x to the power of 4 plus 6x cubed minus 12x squared plus 9x dx. Integrating this, we get negative x to the power of 5 over 5 plus 3x to the power of 4 over 2. Take 4x cubed plus 9x squared over 2 from 3 on 2 to 5 on 2. Bit of a mouthful. That's our first mark. Now, subbing in 5 on 2 and 3 on 2 is going to be our second mark. It's going to take up a fair bit of room, so I'm just going to try and make this as easy as possible to read. So subbing in our 5 on 2 first, we get negative 5 on 2 to the power of 5 over 5 plus 3 5 on 2 to the 4 over 2 minus 4, 5 on 2 to the power of 3, plus 9, 5 on 2 to the power of 2 over 2. That's our first bit, minus our second bit, which is plugging in 3 on 2. So negative 3 on 2 to the power of 5 over 5, plus 3 on 2 to the 4 over 2, minus 4, 3 on 2 to the power of 3, plus 9, 3 on 2 squared over 2. Alrighty, so all of that into your CAS will give you an expected value of 159 over 80 meters. Now the question does not tell us to do, does not tell us to put it in decimal places, so we need to give it an exact form, which is 159 on 80 meters. Don't forget your unit because we're talking about length, so we need that meter there. Guys, that's it for part A. Let's move on to part B. Part B is a 2-mark question as well. And it says, find the probability that a giraffe chosen at random has a neck longer than 2.2 meters. Cool. Let's get rid of this. Now, we're looking for the probability that the giraffe has a length of more than 2.2 meters. Okay? So this is going to be equal to our area under the graph from 2.2 onwards. So from 2.2 up to our maximum, which is 5 on 2, or 2.5, of our function, which is 1 minus x take 2 cubed dx. Awesome. Now, we can just evaluate this, right? So that means that it's equal to, the integral of this is x minus x take 2 to the power of 4 over 4 from 2.2 to 5 on 2. This is our first mark. Evaluating this, we sub in our 5 on 2, so we get 5 on 2 minus 5 on 2 minus 2 to the power of 4 over 4. That's our first bit, that's with 5 on 2. And then we're going to sub in our 2.2. So we get 2.2 minus 2 to the power of 4 over 4. And that's that bit there. So evaluating all this, we get 5 on 2 minus 0.5 to the power of 4 over 4. Minus 2.2 plus 0.2 to the power of 4 over 4. Now what this gives us is 0.2848, and that is our second and final mark for this question. Guys, that's it for that. Let's move on to part CI. Part CI is a 1-mark question. And awesome. And says 15 giraffes are chosen at random from the sanctuary. What is the probability that less than 6 of them have a neck longer than 2.2 meters? Awesome. So we're looking for the probability that x is less than 6, right? Where x, in this case, is our number of giraffes that have a neck longer than 2.2 meters. Awesome. So we're dealing with binomial probability here, okay? Because we have a certain number of trials or a certain number of giraffes, and they can either have a neck longer than 2.2 meters or shorter than 2.2 meters, right? So that means that we're dealing with binomial because there's only 2 options. So what we're going to do is pull up our binomial CDF in our CAS, and it's going to ask us for 4 things. It's going to ask us for lower, upper, N, and P, okay? So lower is our lower bound of x values, all right? So we're looking for everything less than 6. We can't have a negative number of giraffes, which means that our lower is 0. Now, our upper would normally be 6, but because this is less than 6, it means that we're not including 6, which means that our upper is the next one down, which is 5. Our N value is 15 because we're testing 15 giraffes, and our P value is the probability that any given giraffe has a neck longer than 2.2 meters, which we found in the previous question to be 0.2848, right? Can you see that? Just. Cool. Sweet. So then we can plug this into our CAS, click enter, and we get the probability that x is less than 6 equals 0.7651. And that is our first and final mark for part CI, and that's it. So let's move on to part CII. Part CII is a 2-mark question. 2 marks. And it says, given that less than 6 of these giraffes have a neck longer than 2.2 meters, find the probability that more than 3 of them have a neck longer than 2.2 meters. Cool. So we're looking for the probability that more than 3 of them have a neck longer than 2.2 meters, given that less than 6 of them do, okay? So what that means is, according to our given formula, the probability that x is greater than 3 intersect less than 6 over the probability that x is less than 6. Awesome. So what we're saying is we want the probability between 3 and 6, not including 3 and 6, over the probability that x is less than 6. Awesome. So we know that the probability that x is less than 6 is 0.7651. We found that in part CI, but we don't know what this one here is. So what we're going to do is pull up our binomial CDF. And again, it's going to ask us for 4 things: lower, upper, N, and P. Actually, I think P is, that should be right. So our lower bound is, so we're dealing with between 3 and 6, not including 3, which means our lower bound is 4. Upper bound is 6, but not including 6, which means that our upper is 5, okay? N, we've still got 15 giraffes that we're looking at, so N is 15. And the probability that any one of these giraffes has a neck longer than 2.2 meters is still 0.2848. Awesome. Putting this in our CAS tells us that the probability that x lies between 3 and 6, not including those numbers, is 0.4219. And that means that our given formula is 0.4219 over x is less than 6, which is 0.7651. Which equals 0.5515. And that is our second and final mark. Our first mark comes here, a second mark comes here, which means that we're done for part CII. So let's move on to part D. So part DI is a 3-mark question, and actually is quite tricky. DI, 3 marks. I'm going to rub all of this out. I'm not going to need that. So it says, in the sanctuary, trees are classified as either tall or short. Giraffes who have a neck longer than 2.2 meters are more likely to eat from a tall tree because it's easier for them. For any given meal, a giraffe with a neck longer than 2.2 meters has a 3 in 5 chance to eat from a tall tree. So if it's longer than 2.2 meters, it has a 3 in 5 chance to eat from a tall tree. Okay. While a giraffe with a neck shorter than 2.2 meters has a 2 in 5 chance to eat from a tall tree. Right. What is the probability that any randomly chosen giraffe eats from a tall tree during any given meal? Awesome. So as soon as we see this, we should be recognizing that we're dealing with conditional probability, right? Because one thing affects another, which means we're going to be dealing with a tree diagram, okay? So a tree diagram for this, actually I'm going to put it down here because I have space down there, so why not? a giraffe can either have a neck longer than 2.2, so greater than 2.2, or less than or equal to 2.2, or less than. It doesn't really matter either way. Actually, I shouldn't have put those there. So greater than 2.2 or less than or equal to 2.2. And if it's greater than 2.2, it can either eat from a tall tree or a short tree, right? Tall, short, so tall and not tall, I guess. Now, any given giraffe has a 0.2848 chance to have a neck longer than 2.2 meters, right? Which means that it has a 0.7152 chance to be less than or equal to 2.2, right? Because this has to equal to 1. If it's greater than 2.2, if its neck is longer than 2.2 meters, it has a 3 in 5 chance to eat from a tall tree, right? Which means that it has a 2 in 5 chance to eat from a short tree. If a giraffe's neck is less than 2.2 meters, it has a 2 in 5 chance to eat from a tall tree. That's what this sentence tells us, which means it has a 3 in 5 chance to eat from a short tree. Okay, so this is actually our first mark, drawing this tree diagram. Now we have to actually interpret that and find out find out the probability that any randomly chosen giraffe eats from a tall tree during any given meal. So we're looking for the probability that it eats from a tall tree. So it could be longer than 2.2 and then eat from a tall tree, or it could be less than 2.2 and then eat from a tall tree. Okay, so we're looking for these two paths here, which means that our probability is going to be equal to this path, so 0.2848 multiplied by 3 and 5 plus 0.7152 times 2 and 5. That's our second mark. So this is a 3-mark question, but a lot of the marking kind of comes from the marker recognizing that you know what you're doing, if that makes sense. So then from here we can sub this into our CAS and we get 0.1709 plus 0.2861, which equals 0.4570. And that's our third and final mark. So that means that the probability that any randomly chosen giraffe eats from a tall tree during any given meal is 0.4570, which wraps up part DI. So guys, let's move on to part DII. Part DII is a little bit of a trick question. It's 2 marks. Cool. And it says, a ranger is observing a giraffe eat from a short tree. What is the probability that this giraffe has a neck longer than 2.2 meters? Cool. So again, this is a little bit of a trick question because what we're actually saying is what is the probability that this giraffe has a neck longer than 2.2 meters? So X is greater than 2.2, but it's being observed eating from a short tree, right? Which means that it's therefore, given that, it's eating from a short tree. Okay, so what's the probability that its neck is greater than 2.2 meters, given that it's eating from a short tree, right? Which means that this is X is greater than 2.2, intersect eating from a short tree over the probability that it eats from a short tree, okay? Now, the probability, or the intersect between these two things is simply this pathway, right? So greater than 2.2 intersect short, which means to find the probability of that top part, we can say it's 0.2848 multiplied by 2 and 5. Awesome. So we get that over the probability that it's eating from a short tree, right? So we know that the probability that it's eating from a tall tree is 0.4570. We found that in the previous question, which means that the probability it's eating from a short tree is 1 minus that. So 1 minus 0.4570, and that's our first mark there. And our second mark comes from determining the answer. So we get 0.1139 over 0.5430, and what this gives us is 0.2098, which is our second and final mark for this part, and that actually wraps up MM445, guys. So congratulations on finishing the question. If you have any questions, as always, please hit me up in the comments below. But otherwise, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.